Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm here with Dr. Malini Iyer. We're going to be talking about Diwali and the Festival of Light that's happening on November 4th. Going to be an excellent opportunity for you to learn about this celebration of light and also all the astrological implications because they're vast. It's really a story of astrology and cosmology with the dignities of the sun and the moon and Saturn and Mars and all of the nakshatras that are implicit and implied here. So this is a fascinating story, and we're really lucky to have Dr. Malini Iyer here because she's very well versed, not just in the astrology, but also in all the Indian stories. In fact, we just did a weekend course where we talked about like almost 15 Indian holidays. I'm going to show you that as well. But so it's a great opportunity. Malini, thanks for thanks for being here. And how's it going?
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me here. I'm really stoked about doing this video, especially after the weekend astrology course. We had a lot of fun talking about the astrology, the astronomy, the relationship between sun and moon, and all the Indian festivals. Especially, it's really clearly seen during Diwali, like you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to do this with you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. And so, this is really a fun thing to talk about because, again, I love all the Indian celebrations and not just as surface, celebrations to eat candy or explode firecrackers or something, but to actually dig down into the cosmic meaning behind them because everything in Indian energetics really relates back to the cosmology, the aspects of Sanatana Dharma, of Sankhya philosophy. And by the way, one of the things, Diwali is also the birthday of Dhanteras, who is the Lord of Ayurveda.
Yep.
He's also born on Diwali. That's when he's celebrated. So again, all these aspects of Sankhya philosophy, which includes things like Ayurveda, it's the underpinnings of Jyotish. So again, we're also going to talk about how things like, if you know Ayurveda, you've probably heard of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, the three doshas. It's also related to Prana, Tejas, and Ojas, which are the master essences that yoga seeks to cultivate. Yoga basically cultivates Prana, Tejas, and Ojas to raise the Kundalini. And even those aspects are built into the story of the Ramayana and how those things are getting sort of depleted and getting pressured and tested. So we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff here today. And we talked about this in great detail over the weekend course. Before we get in, I just want to show you this. This was the manual from the weekend course, and in fact, I'm actually going to open it up and let people get it if they missed out because it was such an important class. And just show you the manual really quick. As you see, it actually started with a great master class on Indian timekeeping, which is understanding the difference between the zodiac and the calendar. Because one of the things that these holidays do is they show the difference between the zodiac and the calendar and the connections. Like here, solstice, seasons, and zodiac in the Vedas, they had their own calendar months. Again, you can see this is the modern Gregorian calendar. This is the ancient Indian calendar called the Sayana chakra, where they had all of the months, the 6 seasons aligned with the 12 calendar months. All of that was what's called the Saura chakra or the Sayana chakra. And then we have the Soli lunar months. These are still in practice today. They originate from the Vedas. So again, we talked about all of this. Now there's this hybridizing of a Gregorian calendar dates, which India also uses, but Soli lunar months. So there's this kind of hybridizing of these two things. So we talked about that. It was a really good class just on the timekeeping of Eastern and West and especially as we go back into the Vedas, because I went back and looked at all the passages from the Vedas. As you see, we have all of this here. This is from the Yajurveda and the Vedanga Jyotisha. Again, this is what the calendar, this is how it looked back then. The nakshatras and the southern and northern course and the seasons all aligned this way. The sun was also measuring sidereal time, not just sidereal space. So they were measuring the year in 135 nakshatras of the sun. They were measuring the seasons in 4.5 nakshatra portions of the sun. So again, we went over all of that. Then we went over, again, more comparisons. I made sure you understand the real implications of the sidereal zodiac, what we call sidereal zodiac, the near Ayana chakra and the Sayana chakra. And then we got into after all of that, we got into what makes the holidays, because all of that is backstory. But then we got into this, which is the holidays, because these holidays are based on what are called tithis. And that's the relationship of the moon to the sun at different times of the year. So again, the earth is going around the sun, which creates the time of the year. But then at that time, the moon has to line up with where the sun is. So again, both of these things have to come together. So this is what we did as well as we talked about waning cycle, Krishna Paksha, waxing cycle, Shukla Paksha, all the tithis. So people understand, why are we celebrating these times, these holidays at this particular time. You see there's an overview of the tithis. Actually, these tithis are also from the latest text called the Garga Jyotisha and all kinds of other stuff, the latest updates on that. And then the astrology, spiritual forces, all the nakshatras. And then we finally got into the holy days, and we went through Makara Sankranti, and again, all of these different explanations of what's going on. Mahashivaratri happens then. Then we get into Holi, which happens right after. Then we get into Vasant Navratri and Ram Navami, this whole great month of celebrating Lord Rama and like his birth, which is, by the way, opposite when we get into the Ramayana. But we see all these things born here, Ram Navami. Then we also have Hanuman Jayanti. So all of this early spring. Then we get into Akshaya Tritiya. You see the sun is going into here. Then we got into Guru Purnima in the summer, month of Shravan, Nag Panchami, Krishna Janmashtami, Ganesh Chaturthi, Pitru Paksha. Again, we're talking about all of the astrological, cosmological connections. Then we get into Sharad Navaratri, which we're finishing now. And then we finally land on Diwali. And then we also have Margazi at the end. So again, this is a great 2 days, about 10 hours of class, more than 10 hours ultimately. And so this is where Dr. Malini really shines. She really took us through all of these holidays, and with great detail, she narrated these stories. She's not going to go into as much detail here, or we'd be here for an hour, which we're not. But she's going to give a great overview of the backstory of the Ramayana, back at the stage of Narada and whatnot, and Lord Vishnu's curse and all that, and then also what exactly we're doing on Diwali. And then we're going to talk more about the astrological implications as well. So it was a long intro, but now, Dr. Malini, take it away.
Thank you, Sam, for this great overview. I would really recommend people taking the class, because in the class we really built on each holiday and we walked through the year. So there is an understanding of how each month builds on the other, and why particular celebrations at a particular time of the year. So if you're interested, please do take the class. With respect to Diwali, we celebrate Diwali at this time of the year, and this year it's on November 4th. It's the new moon in the month of Kartik, and we celebrate the return of home of Lord Rama. Lord Rama was an Indian king. He ruled the kingdom of Ayodhya. He was the 7th incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So it was Vishnu reincarnated on this planet. And on Diwali, we are celebrating his return home, but also his victory over Ravana, who was the king of Lanka. So Ravana actually had abducted Sita, who is Lord Rama's wife. And he had done that out of spite because his sister, Shurpanaka, was disgraced or felt humiliated by the way Ram and Lakshman treated her. So in order to take revenge, Ravana disguises as a sage. He makes sure to pull Ram and Lakshman out. So Ram and Lakshman and Sita were in exile. They were put in exile by Ram's stepmother, Kaikeyi, and her actions. And so they were in exile, and this was towards the end of their 14-year exile period, when they got into the situation with Ravana where he wanted vengeance. So he lures Lakshman and Ram out of their little dwelling in the forest by a golden deer. And while Ram and Lakshman are looking for this golden deer that Sita really falls in love with and she desires, he disguises as a sage and comes to abduct Sita. When Lakshman leaves to find this deer, he puts the famous Lakshman Rekha around their hut in the forest, and that Lakshman Rekha is a protection ring, which Sita was not supposed to cross. And I say not supposed to cross because she actually crossed it in order to please the sage, who was Ravana disguised as the sage. As soon as she crosses that ring of protection, that Lakshman Rekha, Ravan abducts her and takes her to Sri Lanka or Lanka, which is an island. It's a country south of India, separated by the ocean. And Ram, in order to rescue Sita, had to take the help of Hanuman and the Vanaras, or the reign of monkeys who lived in that region, and they had to cross the ocean, wage a war against Ravana, which was a very difficult war to win. And this was happening. The war happened during the Navratri time, and the last day of Navratri, which is Vijay Dashami, Dashera, Dasara, they all mean the same thing, which is the 10th day after the 9 nights of the goddess, is when Ram finally manages to kill Ravana. And after he kills Ravana, he performs some penance because he realizes Ravana was a great being in himself, because Ravana was very intelligent, he was very learned, and a great king in the south. And after he kills Ravana and performs the penance, he starts to come back home in Ayodhya, which is in the northeastern plains of India. So between Diwali and between Dasara or Vijayadashmi and Diwali, there are about 21 days in which he travels back home. During this time, the ancient Indians or citizens of Ayodhya realized that the two luminaries in the sky, the sun and the moon, were at their darkest. And we'll go into the astrology, and Sam will elaborate on it a little bit more, why they're considered the darkest. We are also, it's also a time after the fall equinox when the sun is really dark and starts to get really dark in the northern hemisphere. So in order for Ram, Sita, and the entire entourage, including Hanuman and everybody who helped them, in order for them to find their way back to Ayodhya, the citizens of Ayodhya light the entire pathway with oil lamps. These are lamps with a wick and oil or ghee in them. And they are made
They're actually called Deepa lamps, and the actual name of Diwali is Deepavali. So just to say that too for people who are like going, it's Deepavali, not Diwali. So, but it's just a kind of simpler way to say it. They're called Deepa lamps. I'm sorry, I just want to put that in there.
Yeah, that's correct. These lamps are called diyas or deepas, and the original or colloquial name of Diwali is Deepavali. And so the citizens of Ayodhya light the entire pathway with these lights. And when Ram, Lakshman, and Sita return back home, they burst these firecrackers so that they can hear their way back home. They can find their way back home, and that marks the celebration of Diwali, which is literally India's answer to Christmas. But because Diwali was established much before Christmas, I would say it is, India's biggest festival of lights. It's the biggest that most of us celebrate in India.
Just to say, I jump in here a little bit,
Yeah.
and just to say that's a great overview. very good telling of the important aspects of the story. Again, it's a very elaborate tale. In the class, we talked about it for about an hour. But the important things to understand here, what we're going to be talking about as well, is all the symbology. Because again, even like as Malini was speaking, there, you want to understand that all of this is symbolic. It is said to also be historic, that Rama was also someone who lived, and this story happened, whether you believe it happened or not, or whatever. Again, but there's a lot of symbology in it as well, particularly with the holiday being celebrated now. As Malini said, the sun is in its debilitated state. The moon is also very close to its debilitated state, and especially shortly thereafter, the moon goes into Scorpio, where it's in its deepest debilitation. But a few other things, even aside from the literal astrology, for example, Ravana is like Saturn, who is powerful here, where the sun is weak in Libra, Saturn is powerful. And Ravana is an incarnation of Saturn in like every way possible. Mm-hmm. And he's defeated by Hanuman, who is an incarnation of Mars, for example. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But even just beyond the symbology, just the nature of the planets as well. For example, and particularly with Sita, because Sita goes through so much. Both of them do. Ram is a king who's no longer on the kingdom. You don't get much weaker than that as a king. And literally, this is a symbol of the sun, which is on the throne, acting with agency and power to bring dharma. Well, in this story, he's off the throne. He has no power. Not only that, his wife is now stolen. So he can't even take care of his wife. I mean, it's like as bad as it can get, really. And but he's still the sun, even though that's the sort of backstory. He's still the king. He's still the sun. He's still upholding dharma. He's still connected to sattva. All of those qualities of the sun and the gunas and those aspects of Sankhya philosophy. Sita, again, she's the moon. Even though she's in a difficult spot, she's tricked into being, even when she's abducted because the power of her power is used against her, which means she's lured out of the circle by the duty and the obligation and the love and devotion to the beggar, to give, to support this, you would say, like a homeless beggar who was asking for food, asking for alms, right? She wanted to take, so it's the tenderness in her heart is like used against her, again, which is a quality of the moon. And so you see these stories, whether people know it or not, this is what the point is, really. And most people don't understand that all the Indian myths and stories are based on these things. And again, what we did in the course is we looked at the cosmology here as well. This is right after the vernal, the autumnal equinox. As Malini said, the sun's getting darker in the sky. It's also Amavasya, which is the 15th lunar day. The sun literally has disappeared. The moon has literally disappeared, right? You can't see it in the sky. It's getting burnt up in the sun. It's those last rays. I'm going to pull the chart up in a second. But the sun is also in its deepest in its lowest dignity in Libra, where again, we don't trust our own agency. We're kind of responding to everyone else's ideas. And the moon, again, is also at its lowest dignity. It's in Libra, about to go into Scorpio. And after it, and again, her being abducted is bad enough, but what happens to Sita later is even more intense. And you can project that forward as the moon doesn't just stay in Libra, that it goes into Scorpio. Then she goes through fire and all kinds of other things that happens as the moon continues. Like if you keep the story going a little bit after the formal Ramayana, you get into the Uttarakhand, which is the adjunct to the story. And there's a trial by fire, and then there's a whole bunch of other things that go on, which Malini will tell. But you want to understand this backdrop is very powerful. Malini, have anything to add to that?
You explained it really well. And once we look at the chart, we can see how the principle of Libra also comes forward with this story, which is power is not concentrated in the hands of one person, but it gets dispersed in the marketplace, so to say. Libra is the marketplace, right? And how the power gets dispersed, and the king has a tough time holding on to that power. So the principles of Libra and the principles of Scorpio. And
explain that part of the story for us. Explain the part of the story, what happens. So again, Ram gets the kingdom stolen from him. His wife, it's not the kingdom is stolen, but he's in exile because of other circumstances. And then his wife is stolen. And then he defeats the one who did it and then comes back and they light the lamps and burst firecrackers so he can find his way home. Then what happens?
Then there is gossip in the kingdom, questioning Sita's purity, her chastity, and whether she was involved in any relationships with Ravana. So in order to address all the gossip, Sita is requested to go through Agni Pariksha. Agni is fire, Pariksha is exam or test. So she was put through trial by fire, and Sita does it.
And so that literally means that she has to get stepped into there's flames all around her, and she has to not get burned.
Yeah, she has to not. So she has to walk through a row of fire and come out unscathed on the other side to testify her purity, which she does, and she passes the trial by fire. And still there is gossip, and still there is scandal and suspicion. So she is requested to go into exile. And, Ram is really torn with the whole decision, but doesn't really, stand up for his wife. Instead, to prove his love for his wife, he makes a golden statue of her and sets it aside on the queen's throne. He never remarries. But Sita at that point is pregnant, and while she's in exile, and nobody knows about it, and she gives birth to these twin brothers, which that to an exile. So it shows how the whole Libra principle of gossip and people talking and the power of the king and the queen, the sun and the moon, slowly being sucked away or dispersed.
Being separated. Yeah. And the thing to understand astrologically, just to show, this is actually the Diwali and the Ramayana of this year, 11/4/2021. This is for west coast of the U.S., 7/11. You can see here that it's the sunrise Tithi. This is how we find it, is we find the Tithi at sunrise. This is the ascendant 1743. The sun is 18. So this is right at sunrise. And the Tithi is Krishna Amavasya, right? That's so this Tithi at sunrise is, again, and it's in the month of Kartika, like we said. So this is the actual day. But again, what happens, so it's at that moment where the sun and moon are both very dark. You see the moon, the sun is in the debilitated sign. The moon isn't yet.
Yes.
So again, we see the king being very debilitated here. And then, as Malini said, one of the things, again, you can also understand about debilitated sun, and it's the archetype of debilitated sun, is prone to hear everybody else's voice and lose your own power in the opinions of others. I say it all the time, right? What exalted sun is like, no, I have agency and I'm clear about my dharma, my purpose. When it's Libra, it's like, is everybody okay if I'm powerful? What does everybody think about my power? What should I? And we're taking consensus with the sun. The sun is not the thing. The king, the king isn't, he's the sovereign. He's the one who has to run the kingdom. And within us, we have that clarity of purpose, right? So in Libra, it gets dispersed in the voices of others. So that's literally what happens. Like Malini said, Ram didn't feel, he wasn't, his masculine failed, let's say, in the sense of standing up for Sita, perhaps, and maybe saying, look, she shouldn't have to do this or something like that. It can illustrate that principle. But then as we move the story forward, and by the way, this isn't any disrespect. It's not to say that the story is wrong or anything like that, but these are things to be interpreted that we can see playing out in the story. And these stories in general are meant to illustrate our lives. It shows an inner conflict that we have all the time in our life. We can't be monolithic about these things. And they're meant to be examined and talked about and understood. These wild inner conflicts happen all the time in your life. Have you ever been in an inner conflict where people are saying something about your family or your loved one, or you have a choice between, do I honor my job or my parent, or I don't know, whatever it might be. So these stories are alive, right? They're not museum pieces. And if we just look at them as museum pieces and we can never explain or talk about any of it, again, it's nothing but divine energy, and everyone is redeemed. In the end, everyone is upholding what they're supposed to be upholding. But we see the trials, right? We see the trials going on. And again, as you move this forward, this is the day after. This is, as you see, Shukla Pratipad. And then if you get into Shukla Dvitya, this is the second lunar day. Now the moon is in Scorpio. So again, as you run the story forward, like Malini just did, and you get into the story, especially in the Uttarakhand and the next version of the story, where Sita goes through the trial by fire and all of these other things, then you really see Sita being tormented, because this is where the moon is now in its deepest debilitated state. Mm-hmm. And even after she passes the trial by fire, by the way, she went through the trial by fire and she passed. It still wasn't good enough. Mm-hmm. They still didn't believe her. So again, all of this suspicion and the things like that, and these are all qualities of Scorpio. So again, we're not talking about this in a general sense. The moon is upset. No, it's literally like the sun, Libra kind of energy, the moon, Scorpio kind of energy. So again, if you again run the story forward a little bit, then the moon really gets in it. Trial by fire, you pass the trial, but there's still suspicion, darkness, and then, and again, this is very much, again, also the feeling of debilitated moon. And those negative qualities of Scorpio is literally, some of it is like paranoia. And again, but Sita, again, both of these sovereigns, both the sun and the moon, even in their plight and even in their difficulty, they rise above. And you see how they sustain. Because even though all this happened with Sita, she stayed devoted.
Yeah.
Maintained her devotion and her purity. And by the way, this is also not just the highest virtue of the moon, but it's also the highest virtue of Scorpio. Scorpio is a very devotional sign. Very devotional, but if they get stuck in all of the projections of others, again, this is nothing but everybody projecting. Scorpio can be very stuck in that kind of thing. Then they can get overcome by the negativity and the toxicity of things around them. But she didn't. She stayed devotional. She stayed connected to the heart.
Yeah.
So these are enormous lessons in not just the astrology, but the story itself is showing, even literally, like the sun and the moon and Libra and Scorpio. Just real quick, last thing, and then I'll get some more feedback here from Malini. But the other thing to understand, the sun and moon are both weak here, but Saturn is exalted here. This is where Saturn is exalted. And literally in the story, Ravana is Saturn, and he's brought the hammer down on the sun. He's taken her wife. He's taken his wife. He's tricked her. But again, it's an exalted Saturn, and even Ravana, he could have done all kinds of things to Sita and done all kinds of things, and he didn't. Ravana was he's an incarnation of Shiva. There's also a huge backstory between Shiva and Vishnu, and a whole lot of other things that happened that were a backstory of how the thing even happened with Sage Narada and whatnot. Again, we get into all of this in the weekend course, but the thing to understand astrologically, though, is where the sun and the moon are very weak here, Saturn is king. Saturn is king here in Libra, and especially Swati Nakshatra. Mm-hmm. But Swati is also ruled by the god Vayu, and Vayu's son was Hanuman. And Hanuman is the one, and Mars is the one that can defeat Saturn. Mm-hmm. By the way, this is why in Sati Sati and difficult Saturn transits, what do we chant?
Hanuman Chalisa.
Hanuman Chalisa. Yeah. Hanuman Chalisa. Where do you think that comes from? It comes from the Ramayana. Because whether people know it or not, this is what's behind it all. Is Ravana was powerful. Ram and Sita weren't at this time. And Hanuman, the monkey god, the hero, the courageous one, who was an incarnation of Mars, came and defeated Saturn and the negative qualities of Saturn. But Saturn, again, wasn't a bad guy. He was Shiva. He was also, all of them were doing their part. These are called Leelas. Mm-hmm. Again, All of them are divine energies. It's up to us to find that. And they're all Leelas. And once you understand that they're Leelas from the cosmic realm that come into the worldly realm, then you don't have to get stuck in all of the problems that people might get stuck in as they're trying to understand these stories. Sorry, Malini, go ahead. I just want to get all the astrology out while I was on a roll.
No, that is really perfect. And while we say these stories and we think about it, we also have to remember the times. They were in a different time period, wherein the power was concentrated in the hands of one person, the king. And if you look at that story from today's filters and today's day and age, a lot of things may feel off because we live in a democratic world where the people choose who's going to form the government. The government is run on a consensus basis. It's not run by a king, so to say. So we all have to put things into perspective. There are a lot of contemporary Indians who would argue that Ravana was, of a great character. Like you said, he never forced himself onto Sita. When she was in Lanka, she was kept really well. And Ravana was very learned, right? He was well versed in Jyotish. He was very well versed in the Vedas. He was a great artist, all these Libra qualities. He was a great artist. He knew dance, music, like nobody else knew. So he was extremely intelligent. He had the knowledge of Ayurveda.
And people need to understand that's a quality of Saturn. People,
Yes.
all these grahas are very misunderstood. People, Saturn, bad. You can't accomplish anything of greatness without Saturn. Saturn is what gives you the capacity to master something, because it's not just, oh, this is fun. You're like, you're willing and you love to work at it and develop it and concentrate on it. Big problem with the world now, we can't concentrate our mind on hardly anything. Mm-hmm. Again, Saturn virtues make someone a master. And you can be a master at a lot of things if you have a powerful Saturn. So he was an incarnation of that. And again, in this part of the story, it shows like an exalted Saturn where you really concentrate and you have reverence for these things. Sorry to interrupt, Malini, but I just wanted to say those qualities are also higher qualities of Saturn.
Yeah, most definitely. And Ravana was said to have 10 heads, which really means like he was as intelligent as 10 people like him put together. That was the magnitude of his intellect and intelligence. Again, it was a Saturn quality in an exalted position. So we have to remember, like Sam said, to take these stories and put them in context of the times that they happened in and how they then apply to the astrology of that time. And even now, these things keep playing in our lives even now. And you beautifully pointed that out, Sam.
Yeah. And, when we see, for example, again, we can break down, this is what we did in a weekend. We went really deep. But for example, another quality of Saturn, Saturn brings fear in everyone. Everyone's afraid of Saturn because of this, because Saturn is strategic. And again, Ravana when he decided to go and stick his nose in this affair, he didn't just jump down there and kind of do something, which is, by the way, what Hanuman did when he was younger. Hanuman had to be trained because Hanuman was Mars. Hanuman would just go like fly into the sun and they had to like really train him to be disciplined because Hanuman was Mars. Mm-hmm. But Ravana is Saturn, which again, all these heads. But one of the things that Saturn gives is strategy. And there's things going on that you don't see. And then by the time there's action, it's very thought out, like the way he got Sita. He didn't just jump down there somehow. It was like, okay, I'll set up this plan. I'll make a golden deer to lure Ram and Lakshman away. Then Lakshman will do a circle, but then I'll come down as a beggar. And so I'll separate them. Then I'll appear this way. Then boom, like, okay, before you know, like you set a trap. Saturn isn't just jumping down there trying to grab them and run. That would be like Mars would do and might maybe blow the whole thing up. Yeah. Saturn is strategic and they got all those heads. You got to understand, he's in many ways, again, like the great intellect in a lot of ways when it's developed. Again, this is why Saturn is also exalted in Libra. Libra is a sign of intelligence. It's an air sign where we're intellectual and want to figure things out, and we concentrate on really understanding the connections between things. And you also see the thing that his great strength was that strategizing, that plan, again, which is and that mastery of all of those sciences. But what really conquered him is the pure essence of Hanuman or Mars energy, which is courage, and devotion. And well, again, what is this lesson? It means we don't conquer our fears by trying to like out Saturn. Saturn is Saturn. You ain't going to out Saturn him, which means you're not going to control the universe better than Saturn is. No. You're not going to do that. You have to have an innocent, courageous heart, which is Mars. You have to be willing to face your fears, face that. Because we went into a lot of these, Molly told so many great stories about Hanuman in the assembly, and they lit his tail on fire. We had it's so amazing. Like, you can really see it clearly when you understand all the stories and the backstories, how Hanuman was just, what he had was devotion to Rama, devotion, discipline, and courage, and an innocent, pure heart. Yeah. And his innocent, pure heart and his devotion was to Rama, was to God, was to know that regardless of what happens, I'll get through it. His pure devotion. By the way, it's the same story that is told in the story of Narasimha and Hiranyakishipu.
Yes.
Because what did that little boy have? Purity, devotion, and courage. He wasn't scared of the one that everybody else was scared of, Prahlada.
Yes.
Prahlad wasn't scared. Everybody else was scared. He wasn't. He was like, no, I'll just be devoted. And who come forth? Narasimha came. He just trusted that the answer would come.
Yeah.
You could draw this direct line between Prahlada and Hanuman in that regard. Do you see that connection?
Yeah.
Both of those stories are really about that innocent courage of Mars. So again, these things play out very powerfully astrologically.
Yeah. And you also said that beautifully in the class, wherein you say in Saturn's sign, Mars is exalted. So Saturn's energy actually exalts Mars. But in the sign of Mars, Saturn is debilitated. So if Saturn goes out raging like Mars, it just sucks the energy out of Saturn.
Because what happens is then, again, Mars is about our actions. And if our actions are coming from a place of worry and stress and fear, which is Saturn in its lowest quality, then we're just getting into all kinds of battles and we're destroying our structure. Yeah. But again, when you add Saturn to Mars, though, then all of that intense energy becomes strategy. Yeah. Becomes a strategy. The reason Hanuman was able to prevail is because he also had a strategy. He was strategic, and he got the the monkeys, the Dhanteras together, and he's the general. This is why Mars is the general of the army. Hanuman was the general. And so again, a general isn't just going out there with no plan. So again, as we say, again, it's a very good astrological explanation as well. Is that, and again, what this can tell you is when you get a Saturn-Mars conjunction pretty much anywhere, Saturn's going to get the worst of it because the impetuousness of Mars upsets the strategy of Saturn, but the strategy of Saturn helps the Mars. Again, this is just a general concept. So that's a great, I really appreciate Malini talking about this. It was great. It's already 40 minutes. It goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, we thought it would be a quick 30-minute video.
I know. It's like you just can't stop. So we could talk about this another 2 hours. But wanted to just especially just give a kind of a unique perspective on Diwali. You've probably heard a lot about it. It's an amazing time to really light that Deepa lamp, that light of devotion in your heart. And again, the one thing that we do in this holiday, and one thing that we talked about even in the weekend, is many of these holidays come in difficult times. Many of them are on new moons and debilitations and things like that, where we have to intentionally bring the light. Shivaratri is another, dark Tithi, dark times. This is one of those times when the sun and moon are both feeling out of sorts. You might be feeling that out of sorts. So we intentionally light the lamp. We intentionally put it there. And we maybe intentionally light a firecracker or something to get ourselves excited. And so, but the real essence of the story is the devotion and the courage to don't be afraid of your fears. Don't run away from those things. Just go forth with that gentle, innocent courage and stay devotional.
Yeah. Today's actually in some parts of India celebrated as the first day of Diwali, called Dhanteras. And it starts with invoking Lakshmi, because Ram was an incarnation of Vishnu and Sita was an incarnation of Lakshmi. So Diwali is also really big in Lakshmi Pujan, right? So we are inviting her into our homes. And, loosely, Lakshmi is considered as the goddess of abundance in India. But, she's also the goddess of mysticism, because she has the owl, a very mystical creature, is a Vahan. So she's not just a goddess of abundance of wealth, but abundance of everything, abundance of wisdom, abundance of happiness, knowledge, even spiritual knowledge, right?
Well, like everything, we look at the most sensationalized. The whole universe is Lakshmi, actually. It's Vishnu's wife. We're living in Lakshmi's universe, really.
Yeah. And so it's a good time to, as you're lighting lamps and setting intentions, set the purest intention possible as you invite these energies into your home, and you can make it your own, right? You can have in India we have rangoli, which is you know colored powders that we use to decorate our entrances as a way to invite Lakshmi. We clean our homes, we light the lamps, we make desserts, and we share it with everybody. So, abundance is not to hoard, but to share with everybody. That's also a Libra principle. So remember to share. Remember to spread the joy.
And Lakshmi is an incarnation of Venus, is a avatar of Venus. The avatar of Venus is Lakshmi.
Yes.
And again, it's not just because of money and wealth. It's because of abundance and sharing. Lakshmi has all the money, but she's got open hands with coins flowing out of them. She's not holding them. She's giving them. It's like, here, take them.
Yes.
Because she knows the greatest wealth isn't the money. It's the love and the devotion and the beauty for no reason. Again, this is the Venus principle, is the happiness for no reason concept, that life is beauty, life is joy.
Yeah. And Libra is ruled by Venus, right?
What's that?
The sign of Libra is also ruled by Venus.
That's what I said. That Lakshmi. Yeah, if I didn't make it that intentional, then yes. So Libra is where all this is happening, is the domain of Venus, right? And so this is really playing out, again, in that whole realm. So it's a time to wear the new clothing and to really connect with with the neighbors and with the community. And again, it's as things are getting darker, when you look at this in the context of the year, the summer is over, August, September, we just passed through. Now what's ahead is like darker days are coming. It's like right at that time when we can just sense. I remember when I was a kid, that sense of dread, like the summer was there, and then we go back to school at the end of the summer, and there's still about a month where you're like, okay, it's still kind of warm and we're still kind of in the summer. And then all of a sudden there's like a couple weekends, and that Sunday dread, it's like, oh no, we're in the long haul now.
Yeah.
Summer's gone. It's darker and darker, winter, and we can't even hardly imagine that it's going to get warm again. It's like, what's ahead. So those times it can be sort of bleak. Mm-hmm. And so at those times we intentionally light the lamps, remember God, remember the hopeful kingdom. And again, the story kind of plays out within us. Like we're feeling like the kind of, sort of debilitated king, where in the summer we were like, yes, I'm king, I have power. And it's like, now it's less. The vitality of the sun feels less. Oh, the last thing that I'll talk about is this prana, ojas, and tejas. Again, the sun is that light, which, again, when we look at it from an Ayurvedic perspective, people often know it as what's called pitta. But pitta is the derangement of the dosha. That's a dosha, which means a derangement. Pitta, dosha means too much. The master essence is called tejas. Tejas, Shakti, power. Tejas, Shakti. The power of fire is tejas, the radiance, right? Vata is a derangement of what's called prana. You've heard of prana. Well, prana is the essence of what you have in you and how much life force you have. And your prana draining away, your prana drains away through vata. Vata is the prana getting all over the place. And by the way, this is symbolized by Hanuman controlling all the monkeys running around, because where does all your vata go? In your mind, like a bunch of monkeys running all over the place. That's where your prana is going. This is why we do the thing called pranayama in yoga. You learn to control the prana with things like pranayama, alternate nostril breathing, bastrika, intense breath that gives a lot of prana and concentrates it. Right? So prana is the master essence of vata. What did Lakshman have? I'm sorry, what did Ravana have? Prana. He was the master of his prana. When we talk about Saturn and strategy and all, Saturn is the planet of prana, and he's the planet of vata. Saturn gives vata disorders, but he ultimately shows how much prana you have, because he's the one that takes the prana too. That's why he's the indicator of death and taking the prana eventually. Because you're alive because of prana. Okay? So again, in this story, we're seeing a lot of, again, you want to keep these things in mind. And ojas is the master essence of kapha. You may have heard of Ayurvedic kapha, where there's too much water. Well, the balanced water and the master essence of water is called ojas. Ojas Shakti. Again, and ojas is the container. Your body is, your form, and water and substance has a lot of that ojas. Ojas is the structure, prana is the movement, and tejas is the fire or the radiance. And when these three things are in harmony, the kundalini rises. You need them all to be in harmony. What happens is the ojas and the tejas, fire and water, are up here, and they need to be balanced so that the prana can rise. So again, these on a very kind of cosmic level of Sankhya and whatnot, Saturn, Sun, and Moon are all, they're the three that really show, especially the Vata Pitta Kapha. And so again, we can see how Hanuman, as the lord of Swati Nakshatra, again, Swati is what? The wind god, Vayu. Swati is ruled by Vayu, the wind, and his son Hanuman, he's the incarnation of Vayu. So he's the one who has the prana, has the essence, and has that power. So you see this all playing out in that nakshatra as well. And by the way, even opposite that nakshatra is Ashwini, which is another major nakshatra of prana, because it's the two horses, and they all that prana and energy in Ashwini. Opposite that is Swati, where you have all of that prana and breath as well. So again, the zodiac is full of these cosmic connections. We talked about all of that kind of stuff in the weekend course. So I'll have a link down there for those of you who want to get it. I'm going to keep it open for about another week because I really think it's valuable. So Malini, thanks for talking about this. It was great to have you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me and doing this. I think it's really important to understand the stories, because the stories connect to our heart in a different way. And that's what produces that rasa, right? That devotion within us, that juice that is required, because you can do all kinds of practices, but if your heart is not soft, you cannot really receive the divine. So yeah, thank you for doing the course and even this video, because it's really important for us to.
That's a big part of what we talked about in the course as well. We talked about all of these deities and this devotion. And as we went through each holiday, what Malini did is she talked about all the stories. She brought the stories out in great detail. And we examined, like in Shivaratri, how the hunter was in the tree stuck and crying tears of devotion that actually did Abhishekam to the Shiva lingam beneath him. And every one of these stories, every one of these holidays are just loaded with devotion. It's just like, and devotion to the specific things that are happening at that specific time of the year.
Yeah.
And that's when we can really get the message. That's why we're doing it at that time of the year. So again, wonderful to talk about this. I love this subject and I love these holidays around this time of the year. And so thanks a lot, folks. And go ahead and, join the channel, whatnot, like, subscribe, do all of that. And we'll put a link to all of Malini's information here as well. Sorry, I didn't say that as much. Malini's an excellent astrologer in her own right. You'll see her details underneath and, get readings from her and do whatever it is that she's doing. You'll be very happy that you did.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, thanks, folks.